Hi, I'm Patty Dunn. I want to show you a great, easy jacket that you can make. It's cut on the bias, and it looks fabulous on, and I'm going to show you several things about the construction of it and easy ways to finish it, and then I'm going to put a little coloring fun in there at the end. So let's talk about first what kind of fabric works the best on the bias, because if you don't have a soft fabric, you may have a problem with the way it looks. This is a cotton fabric right here, and it is stiff, and you can see it holds its own shape. If you were going to use something like this, you would want to make sure that you put a good amount of weight at the bottom of this jacket so that it weighs it down and lets it hang good, because it has a swing in the back, if you can see. Then also there is a cotton linen blend, and here that little bit of linen, a rayon linen blend, that little bit of rayon in there just softens that, and you can see that it relaxes. Here's a lighter weight rayon, and then there's a heavier weight rayon. But the key is you take the fabric and you pull it on the bias, and then you take a look and see what it does. Just because a fabric is sheer does not mean it's going to lay on the bias well. If you notice this, it stands just like it looks this way. So this is not going to be good. You're going to look like a tent. So don't get that kind of fabric for this. This is a soft polyester, and look how soft that lays wonderfully. But now here's another polyester, and see how it curls. Anytime you find a fabric that does its own thing, you don't want it. It's going to do its own thing when it gets on you too, and you're not going to be happy with it. Now, silk is fabulous for this jacket. This is a silk burnout like the one I'm wearing, and if you don't like to work with silk, you can take and spray starch it and get a little bit of stiffness on it while you're working with it, and it makes it so much better. But see how lovely that flows on the bias? It's a wonderful fabric. And one other fabric that I would have never thought would have worked, but my friend Jean Grebe made a fabulous jacket out of this. It's a loose weave acrylic, and because of the softness of this fabric, it just lays wonderfully. So this is some choices that you might want to make, and the key is it needs to be nice and soft, because that's important, and you don't want it to do its own thing. Now let's talk about the layout, because it's a little different when you have the bias. On the bias, to find the bias, this would be your selvage, and this would be your selvage. This is both sides of the selvage. If you take the corner of this selvage and meet the opposite corner of this selvage, you have now found the bias edge. And a lot of you have probably already done that type of thing and know that, but I'm just wanting to make sure that you understand, because this is not the normal way you would cut out a jacket. And in the pattern instructions, it tells you to lay it on this bias fold. The reason I do that is because cutting out two at the same time makes it much better, because they are going to be cut exactly the same. Now, if your fabric is real wiggly and squiggly and you don't feel comfortable about having it, you can pin it together on the outside, or you can go ahead and mark this diagonal line with a ruler. So you'd lay your ruler on the opposite points, and you would mark your line. This is why you would want, because that's not straight, you'd want your ruler up there. But you would mark that line, and then what you can do is lay your fabric down, your pattern down, and then flip it over like that. And then the other pieces of the pattern are laid out with the bias also going the same way. So be sure that if you're going this way, that your bias matches this rather than this straight of the grain. So there is a straight of the grain that you can also match up, but it's just a little bit different than what the normal jacket is. But the wonderful thing about bias is It's soft, it drapes, it lays to your body. It's elegant looking, and you can really do some neat things, and you look fabulous in it. So now let me show you some of the ways to construct the seams now. Some people have a serger, and they do great with the serger, and this is a great way to put this jacket together. But not all the time does the fabric like the serger, and so if you have sometimes a real thin fabric, you may not want a serger heavy stitch in there. So this is a French seam, and if you have not ever done a French seam, it's very, very easy, and see how it's finished? There's just a little ridge there, and it's all enclosed. Let me show you how to put the French seam together if you've never done that. And this is the jacket. Look at how many pieces there are. This is the simplest jacket you're ever going to make. This, if you did it with a serger, would be just serging those sleeves onto the front and onto the back. But if you wanted to do a French seam, what you do is you will always work with the wrong sides together first rather than the right sides together. And you're going to stitch, putting your presser foot right on the edge of the raw edge, and then you're going to move your needle position over, and you're going to stitch right close to the edge. This needs to be 1/8 of an inch. But even with this, you want to still trim away the extra so that you just hardly have anything left, because this is very important, because otherwise you get all these little pokies coming through, which is in the inside of your jacket, but I mean, it's okay. You will be happy with it, whether or not. You can just go in and trim them too, but this is a way to do it before you don't like it. So now I'm going to tell you, don't open the seam yet. Go and press it just like that. Press it flat, because that melts the thread into the fabric, and it will help you when you go to turn this and make it go into the seam. So now what you're going to do is then press the seam allowance to the side, and then you're going to close the seam like that, and then you're going to press it again. Pressing is critical, because if you don't get that pressed, you'll have the seam will kind of look real wavy. Then you're going to come back over here, and with a 1/4 inch stitch from the seam allowance, you're going to stitch right along the edge. Again, if you put your presser foot right on the corner, right on the edge of that, and move your needle position to the center, on most machines, that's going to end up to be a 1/4 inch. And that is a 3/8 inch seam. And there again, there's no waste on this fabric, because you're going to have very narrow seams, and it's a larger, it isn't form-fitting, it's a larger jacket, so it drapes on you, and you don't have to worry about having all this extra seam allowance that you've got to cut away. So then, here's my little miniature jacket, and all I do is stitch up the side seams. Now, the same thing applies if I were going to do this as a French seam. I would put the wrong sides together first, and then turn it, do all that pressing like I suggested, and then do your bottom. Now, what happens to a bias edge when you have a seam going down is that sometimes the seam stretches. Most every time it does. And so you end up with this little peak right at the bottom of that fabric, of that jacket bottom. And so what I suggest that you do is put them both together, because you're going to cut them both at the same time, and get a French curve or some kind of a rounded curve so that you can smooth off the bottom edge of that point, so that it doesn't look like a point anymore, because that's not going to look real pretty. That way it's smooth all the way around your body, and at the hip area it's nice and straight. So that's going to happen. Some fabrics are going to do more than others with that, but that is going to happen. So just be aware of that. You didn't do anything wrong. that's the character of some fabrics, or maybe the machine, or maybe the thread, or whatever. So don't feel like that's bad. Okay, so now let me show you great jacket. This jacket was our challenge winner, and we had a jacket challenge on my website, and you used one of my patterns, and this was done by Tony Katz from Bartlett, Tennessee, and she was the winner by popular choice, and lots of people got on the website and voted, and she did a ruffle around the front of the jacket. She has a fabulous fabric. Of course, she owns a fabric store, so what can you say? She's got access to lots of cool fabrics. And she also, instead of like the jacket I have on, she did a rolled hem edge on the outside of the jacket so that it stands up a little bit more. So see the perkiness of hers, and mine is just a little softer, which makes a little difference in the way that it lays. This jacket was made with an edge couched over it. And this is just a very, very simple edge finish where I just took I did a rolled hem first, and then I just couched a cord over top of that jacket edge, all the way around, sleeve, bottom, everywhere. And then, speaking of rolled edges, here's a wonderful sheer fabric that just lent itself to fluting. And so I just let it flute. I put the differential feed on, I moved it up and I caused this to flute slightly. But the one thing that I did, that's the secret to this, is I did it once, then I took the knife up and I went over top of it again, and I loosened my upper looper thread so that it made just a little bit more of a thicker edge, and so it wasn't just falling down and kind of puny looking. Now here is the wonderful jacket that I was telling you about that Jean Grebe made out of that soft acrylic, and Jean put a couched thread over top of the edge, and she just frayed that very, very edge, leaving it just raw. And she did a little bit of couching on this thread, which has caused the stability of the neck. So she did a fabulous job, and this jacket is so fun to wear. It feels like a sweater. It's really nice. It really, you ought to try that fabric. That's really a great fabric to use. Here's a quilter's cotton, and remember how I said you need to have something that's kind of heavy and weighted on the bottom? Well, I put a double layer bias edge, and I let it fray at the bottom of this, and it's caused this to hang really well. And so I also did that to the front. There are tons and tons of options that you can do, and I'm only going to show you two because we only have time for two, but you can think up all kinds of things because there isn't a facing, there isn't anything to have to work with. It's just whatever you want to do on the edge. You could even put a collar on the edge. Now let me show you about how you're going to put, the most popular one is this double edged bias like the last one that I just showed you. And what you're going to do is do two widths different. So I'm going to cut this one 2 inches and this one 1 3/4 inch, or however long you want it. And what's going to happen is this is going to be sandwiched between the bottom layer. And you're going to do the bottom of the jacket first. And the first thing you're going to do is put the right side to the right side of the jacket, the front of the jacket on the bottom. Okay? And then you're going to put the wrong side to the wrong side of the jacket so that when you come around, you're going to actually show the two pieces right. Now let me show you what it looks like over here because it's sort of hard to show you on that little piece. But all I'm doing is sandwiching the front of the jacket in with the 2 pieces of bias. And this bias is then going to come this way and then down. And do you see? Then they start to fray. And see how they fray over here? Just beautifully. Some fabrics fray better than others. Some don't fray at all. So that's the other thing that you want to consider. And here's putting this front on. I can actually just stay stitched down the front of the jacket, and then I can put this fusible web on this and press it to the front. That's very important. Press it to the front, and then if I wanted to put a trim on, then all I do is lay the trim over that raw edge and it covers it all up, and it works great. Or one more idea, this one is if I have a ruffle, I do the ruffle and I do the same thing with the edge that I just did using the seam, fusible seam allowance, seam tape, and then I'm going to take and put this ruffle straight on to that raw edge again. Of course, I serged this one, but you could leave it raw if you wanted to. And see, you're going to cover that all up, and nobody's going to know what's underneath that ruffle. And now I want to show you how to put color on this jacket with shaving cream. Oh, this is going to be so fun. So let's come over here to our little display here of things that we are going to need for shaving cream and color. First of all, what you use is a shaving cream that is not going to have a whole lot of moisture in it, so get the cheapest shaving cream you can find. And I got a feeling your husband's probably using one that's a little bit more expensive, so you'll probably have to go get your own, but he'd probably like that better, right? So I'm going to just take this shaving cream, shake it up just a little bit, and I'm going to work on this pressing sheet here. The neat thing about this pressing sheet is that it has a tacky side underneath, and so whatever I do, it sticks on there and it won't wiggle around. And it will take heat up to 500 degrees. So you can do your project and heat it right there on top of this pressing sheet. Now what I'm going to do is make a little pile of shaving cream, and a little goes a long way. I'm going to take a tongue depressor and I'm going to flatten it out to where it's got a little flat space for me to work. And now what I'm going to do is take some of this ink. Now let me tell you, I have learned this technique from Trish Stewart, and she is the queen of color. And I had so much fun with her. I went to several of the quilt shows there around the country, and we demoed this, and I said, Trish, I need to show them this. This is really fun. So what I'm going to do is dip a stir stick. Now you know you go over to the coffee place and you get the coffee, and let me tell you something. You deserve the stick. You paid enough for the coffee, so just get an extra stick. That's just a stir stick that you're using. But you can get an eyedropper, but for some reason I think it appeals to me to use the stir stick because it makes the ink go into the shaving cream just a little easier. I'm going to use 2 colors, and I'm going to do this like a marbling effect. And if you are looking at this color, you can see that it's kind of wet looking. And when it sits in that shaving cream, it starts to absorb, and you can see right now that some of the spots, are dull and some of them are shiny. Until they get dull, you're not ready, because the shiny things will actually streak onto your fabric. So you want to let it set until you see most of those little places are dull. I'm just going to blow it to help it along a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is start moving the ink around just a little bit. And do you see the color? Of course, if you've marbled a cake or anything like that, you've done this yourself. But a little goes a long way when you're stirring. If you stir too much, you'll get one color. And you can actually whip one color up and just do the whole thing in one color. There's tons of ways to do this, and my friend Trish has got a lot of ways. Now what I'm going to do is use this little spongy thing, and I'm going to just go and pick up the color like this, and I'm going to wipe it on my fabric, and look at that. You can wipe it on with a spongy, you can daub it on, or you can also paint it on. And then once you get it on there, you're just going to take this and you're going to squeegee it off, and there is your fabric and the colors on it. Now this is a pink fabric, so it's looking a little different, but I didn't want the color to bounce, the white to bounce off of the camera for you. So you can kind of see that. It works great on a cotton, and you will love this technique. You ought to try it. You'll like it. This was just ink and shaving cream. Well, now what are you going to do with that?
Are we on?
Yes.
What do you think? Huh? Made specially for me by Patty Dunn. And she's talking about this jacket on the program. This alone, you should call because of this.